Morning. Today I'm excited to introduce Dr. Ratana Chuenpagdee, who came all the way from the East Coast, where she's a Canada Research Chair in Natural, Sustainable and Community Development and a professor at the Geography Department at the Memorial University in Newfoundland, St. John's. Dr. Chuenpagdee completed her PhD here at the Fisheries Center with Dr. Daniel Pauly a few years back and still is an associated faculty. For many years now, her work focuses on small-scale fisheries and especially how to tackle their marginalization and elevate the profile of small-scale fisheries by applying interdisciplinary as well as transdisciplinary approaches. Today, Ratana's excellent work and many contributions to the fisheries science globally, as well as her inexhaustible dedication to small-scale fisheries, have made her the leader of a global partnership of small-scale fisheries research called Too Big to Ignore, where she has not only mobilized over 60 partner institutions, but more than hundreds of collaborators from all over the globe. Her talk today is Innovations and Opportunities in Small-Scale Fisheries. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chuenpagdee.
Thank you, Anna. I would not move from this station because there is no little clicker thing, but it's not an issue. I usually don't like to walk around too much anyway when I talk, because then I will lose what I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Anna, for this invitation. It's definitely a joy to be back at home, and glad to see some of the familiar faces, but more new faces than those that I remember. So I guess we have all moved on or another. And for myself, it's been a very interesting journey from, moving from Vancouver, going to Virginia, before I went back to Canada. But my stint in the US was sort of like, a little scary because I was very close to Washington, D.C. at the time and the Bush administration. So I decided that it was time to go back to Canada, and it was a good decision. Perhaps though, I should say that now I've been told, right, that I might want to go back to US one day. Depends on how things go in this country. But you'll hear a little bit more about that because I'm always very critical about how we do things in Canada and around the world, especially when it comes to small-scale fisheries. So we really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our project and also to show you a little bit about what we have been thinking and doing. And there are members of the project in the room, quite a few of them actually. So all, what I'm saying here, one of our partners is around us, and many of the working group members are based here in Vancouver, Evelyn Pinkerton being one, and Rachid Sumaila, who has to be elsewhere. But Anna and Neil are students in our project. William is our project member. So quite a few other people that I haven't really spoke to you today. And so the point about this is something that I like to start, right? It is about, one of those things that you might or might not realize unless you really pay good attention to. Because a lot of time people use the word fisheries, like we do here at the Fisheries Center. And we think we know what we're talking about. And we may actually started to form an opinion about, oh, that is what we mean. Hear the word fisheries. But I would argue that we need to be more specific. Because when we talk about fisheries, we have to recognize that they're not one and the same all around the world. And in fact, if you started to look more carefully, we'll start to see that the sector that we are interested in the project perspective and all my research, are actually the small-scale fisheries that not too many people at important decision-making level pay attention to. So we started to wonder, it is true that there are so many more small-scale fisheries in the world and making all this contribution to food security, to poverty alleviation and livelihoods, etc., and how important they are they really visible in the mind of policy? So they started to say something like, well, but small-scale fisheries are people in the south. And I said, wait a minute, I now live in Newfoundland. There are small boat fishing people. There are some of them here in British Columbia, across Canada, and other places in the north. So this thing about, well, when it comes to small-scale fisheries, we don't really need to talk about them so much because they're those in the south. That needs to go. And then in our own mind also, we need to recognize that it can take place in just about any water bodies. You can, if there's a little bit of water, then there can be fishing and there can be small scale. So, we look a lot at the marine system, but we know that there's a lot more in the inland system and in lake, lagoon, estuary, etc. And then not only this kind of fish harvesting or capture of fisheries, but also small-scale farming that happens around the world. What we also wanted to recognize is that there's also something that women and children do. So this is not, something that we see or talk a lot hear the conversation a lot about in terms of those people that are really, really involved. And this is just in the harvesting sector, not just in the harvesting sector alone, but in also what we call throughout the fish chain. There's something that happens in the ecosystem in the pre-harvest. There's also something that post-harvest. All those activities need to be part of what we look at when we try to look at small-scale fisheries. So our observation then leads us to the following statement. We believe that despite what we know or what we think we know about small-scale fisheries and the rhetoric about how important they are and the contribution they make, and just for the fact that we know that there's so many of them are out there that doing their business, we still really have to say that for the most part they are marginalized and have been ignored. And I'm talking mainly about from the economic perspective, marginalization, from political perspective, from the governance, from geographically, they're quite remote in some places, but there's a lot of urban type of small-scale fishing takes place. They're also not being seen, not visible to the eye of the people. So this, being ignored, being so big and then still being ignored is something that is quite puzzling to us. So we have to start asking the question, why is that the case? And if it's really the case, what do we need to do to change that? And this is what led us to do the project, the Too Big to Ignore, which is a global partnership for small-scale fisheries research. What are we trying to do then in Too Big to Ignore? Basically, it's about, if we recognize that there are quite a lot of them and they make those important contributions and we need to know more about them, then we need to be able to understand and really see what they look like, who they are, and what they do, and what they are, how they're vulnerable to all these changes, and whether we can support the sector and making them more viable. So the first task then of the Too Big project is to elevate the profile of small-scale fisheries, make sure that they are visible, they are recognized, and people started to understand their contribution. Then we can argue against that marginalization at the national and international policies. So we have a lot of help along the way to make this happen. So it's not like we starting from not a very good platform to do this. So it's a good momentum, if you like, for small-scale fisheries of the world to be able to start seeing that we can make a case for them. And that our role is to conduct research and capacity development in order to help influence policies at various levels. So whenever we talk about fisheries, we want people to know that we need to differentiate between different types of fisheries, talk about large-scale industrial fisheries, that we're not going to apply the same policy and management system to those sectors if the management and the policy on large-scale fisheries would have to be different from the small fisheries. And they're based on the different principles, and they have to be operated in different ways as well in terms of implementation of the policy. So those are the points that we're trying to make. And now, I live in Newfoundland, and a lot of interests are not about fisheries, even though we hear about them. It's about oil and gas. So the tension and the competing interest is not just within large scale and small scale anymore. It's about what's happening around the sector. So that's a kind of message that we need to be able to communicate and also bring to the fore the conversation that is required in order to keep small scale fisheries going. But if you talk to the people around the world, some people recognize the importance and perhaps would say, of course we need small scale fishing people. But there are places they said, but we could do away with them. We really don't need them. And so that kind of discussion needs to take place at high level as well in order to make sure that in places where small scale fisheries have rights and have a traditional access to the resources, they need to be able to speak. And others may be way for them. So those are the kind of things that we are trying to do in Vietnam. It's a pretty large network. When we started already, we had that's the data I put there, those people that we started the project with. But we actually have expanded a lot since then, especially after the Congress in Merida that we had, which was the Second World Small Scale Fisheries Congress. So we have now invited a lot of people to join the network, and it's an open network, so the more the better. So as many small-scale fisheries people we have in the world, we should have not as many small-scale fisheries researchers, but at least proportionately we should have that many small-scale fishing researchers interested in small-scale fisheries around the world. So we're starting to collect more people to be supportive of small-scale fisheries and talk about what we need to do together. The project is funded by SSHRC, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and so they gave us the money to start the project, and we have matching funds of the equal amount actually from our partners and research team. So I mentioned already that Sea Around Us is one of our partners, but FAO is also our partner. So we have partners at various levels, intergovernmental organizations like FAO or Bengal Commission Committee, and the Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center. But we also have partners at a very local level, like we have Masifandise, which is our fisher organization partner in South Africa. We also have other kind of NGOs type partner like Nature Conservancies. So now we have, like I said, expanded our network quite broadly so that we have now more partners around the world. And what have they been doing in the last 2 years? Basically, they have been doing research, they have been doing networking, they have been trying to build information system to help us understand what's going on in the world of small-scale fisheries. I'm presenting here the kind of summary of what we learned so far about small-scale fisheries of the world. And I wanted to present them in this fashion, to think about them in terms of innovation opportunities. And this is because we are at fault of talking about small-scale fisheries and misery, about how they're being marginalized, how nobody pays attention to them, etc., etc. We need to move beyond that. And to move beyond that is to really speak about the opportunities and the contribution and the innovation that can take place in this sector that can help us think about what we need to do together to really move forward to sustain the future of small-scale fisheries. We learn that there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of opportunities that already exist and that can also be fostered and facilitated and supported. So I talk about this in 3 ways. First, it's about technological innovation, and then I would explain a little bit about research innovation, and I'll talk about governance. When it comes to technological innovation, I have to admit that, well, our project is not really about understanding how fishing technology can be improved in the small-scale fishing sector or even post-harvest technology. But we need to recognize that they exist. And we need to really learn more about those, because we are not, we're not doing technological development, so we don't really do any research on that, but we work with people who do research on that and therefore we learned about what's happening in the sectors when it comes to fishing technology or post-harvest technology. And then we collaborate with them to make our work more relevant and more meaningful. But we do on our own information technology, trying to build something for small-scale fisheries, and I will talk more about that. But let's just take a look first at technological innovation that can take place in this sector. We talk about communication technology. A lot of fishing people now use cell phone or mobile device that can help them communicate, talking about being safe in the sea, in their workplace, learning about where to actually bring their fish to whoever offers the best prices for the market, etc. So there's a network of fishing people that use that kind of communication technology. We learned that there are places where they would make modification, adaptation of the work of the tool that they used in the past. The sail is something that we're hearing more and more in terms of, I mean, this is a picture in Mexico. They didn't use sail before, but now they are implementing that to help reduce cost and etc. My other research is about how fishing gears impact the environment in terms of the ecosystem, in terms of habitats and bycatch. And I would be the first to admit that small-scale fishing gears can also create those impacts. So this is not about not understanding that, but there are a lot of small-scale fishing practices that actually are about small impact compared to larger scales. So we need to really put that into context and look at all those innovations. And of course, there's a risk there as well, because we have seen a lot of small-scale fishing that use innovation to do something that's quite destructive to the environment. So we are very aware of that, but we are really looking at low cost and small impact fishing technology in terms of innovation that takes place, and trying to share that information to other people around the world so that they can learn that if you really want to be viable and sustainable, you don't need to use destructive fishing gears, but you can actually do better by using other gears. This is an example of what you do with your fish once you finish, once they land. And this is a project I worked with in Malawi. And for a while, this is how they would carry the fish and get them dry in the process. You just hang them, right? Right there as you drive your car. Why put the fish in a car and make it smell? You just kind of carry them that way. So that's how people do it. And it's fantastic. I thought it was an innovation. Of course, we need to work with them to make sure that there's not going to be health issue and quality type, and whether they can export the fish and you hang them around that window like that. So the drying of the fish in the many lakes in Africa is also quite it has gone through a lot of innovation as we were working with the post-harvest technology, because they used to dry the fish on the ground, and it's mixed with everything. So a raised platform to dry the fish had become one of those things that started to pick up a lot in many places, in many places in Africa, to help improve that post-harvest quality of the fish, and for better market prices that they can also access with better quality fish. So that becomes something that we're learning more about, and in many other places. So the always good example is to learn from what happens in one place like Africa compared to what happened in Asia and other Latin American countries. So the project actually allows us to see how things are compared around the world. It is not something that is easy to observe, but with the kind of network and the approach that we take, it makes it possible. So learning from one place actually helps the other groups of fishing people in other places. So there's a lot of exchange happening between fishing people in Africa and fishing people in Asia, in Southeast Asia in particular, through the work of our projects and other projects, to try to learn from each other in terms of post-harvest technology. And here is what I'm very excited about, and this is something that we have been quite proud of and been working on this for a while. We actually want to say that when people say we don't know about small-scale fishery, is it because really there is no data, or it's that the data is not being used or not being presented in a way that it can really be used? or it's really nobody put their data in a place where we can access and learn about it. So we are transforming the way we think a little bit about information, going from the traditional system into what we call crowdsourcing information system. In a nutshell, it is about we depend on everybody to help us make it possible to put information into this information system that we are building. So the information system on small-scale fisheries is about bringing information in through the crowdsourcing platform into a system that then everybody can access and make use of however you like. So I'm just showing a little bit of the interface that we built. We just launched this in Mexico at the Congress in September. It is still under development in many ways, but we were able to put in a few layers of data to make it possible for people to start contributing the data and also use the information system to learn about what's happening in the world of small-scale fisheries. So I have a big team, well actually a small team but big hearts, people with really a lot of energy to try to make this happen. A lot of young people are involved in this as well, which is what we need in order to take this, to make it, the interface work with the audience that we target. And the audience we target are not researchers alone. We target policy people, we target community groups, and environmental groups, and fishing people groups. So we want to make sure that this works for everyone because it's online, it's open access. If you go to toobigtoignore.net, you will find these links to this. So it's still a lot of work to be done, but it's there. And many of you are part of that already. So we found out who you are, what kind of research you do, and we put you in the system. We call you our researchers. We put your publications in the system so that people who are interested in learning about who study climate change in small-scale fisheries, they will see the name Willemsen happening. So we need more of that, and we need all of you in there in order so that the world can know about what you do. So where does research take place? Research takes place around the world. Knowledge is happening around the world. So you can look at, you can go into a place and try to find, well, who's doing research in India where I'm from? Or whatever, not where I'm from, but where some of you are from. Who's doing research in Thailand where I'm from, right? So those are the efforts that we're trying to do with this information system. You can put information in there, and then you can take information out of it by making a query and search and trying to learn what's going on and connect to people. So there are data sets that you can select. There are different types of view, whether it's a map or table, and there's a lot of advanced search features for those really who like to dig deeper. But there's a lot of ways that we can communicate and use this as a platform to really talk about small-scale fisheries. Hopefully, with this effort, nobody can stop, people wouldn't stop saying, well, there can't be that many of them out there, and we don't know where they are. Because now we're going to tell them that if you want to know where they are, you just have to look at information system, our ISSF platform, and you can. But imagine millions of them out there happening in all parts of the world. We need a lot of help to make this happen, and that's why the crowdsourcing. And hopefully, we will talk to someone who would build us the mobile application so that it will be easier for people to. One of the things that could come out of that kind of information system is to do something like this. This is more like a snapshot of what's happening in the world of small-scale fisheries in Africa. We did this for 5 regions of the world, so I'm just going to show you one. This is what the project is, this particular part of the information system is just the state of the art. It's, like I said, the snapshot. So you need to know, what's happening in the ecosystem, in the market chain, what kind of emphasis that has been put in when people who study or do research on small-scale fisheries in Africa, those are the things that they focus on so far. So that could become something that people start to say, well, but why don't people do any work in these other areas, like in Northern Africa? Are there more research done there that we don't know of? Perhaps we should look more into that. What about other aspects that really get less emphasis, or what are the important issues that have not yet been raised through this research? So the two parts that we now have in the information system is about researchers and research. And that's because it's our research network, that's the easiest place for us to start. But we want to make sure that this goes to community level. So eventually there will be parts about community efforts, organizations at various levels that are trying to do the work and help small-scale fisheries. We would then do snapshot of them as well. Okay, so things need to be, we need to make this applicable in all levels. So that is just an example of what we can do once we have that information system, and a lot more information and knowledge synthesis that can be generated through that system. So I'm just going to spend a bit of time looking at the thick description and system analysis, and then talk a little bit about the new effort, which is a lot to do with transdisciplinary research. This you have seen. This is what Daniel has put together, making a case. He was one of the first people who tried to tell us there's a difference between these two words and we need to pay close attention. What we hope to do with our thick analysis and the study that we do is to add to that, in addition to providing more information to compare the large scale and small scale, but try to provide narrative and other qualitative information to talk about who they are, where they fish, and what their fishing looks like, what contribution they make, and what happens to their catches after the land, and what role do they play in environmental conservation. So those are many, many questions that a lot of the work that we're doing in the partnership are trying to do through asking big questions. Viability, well-being, stewardship, rights and access, and governance. Those are the big 5 questions that we're asking. And we continue to ask those questions, do research around the world with lots of case studies so that we learn more as we go. And synthesize that knowledge and then mobilize that effectively. So that's our goal. So when it comes to fisheries, we always have to remind ourselves, it is not an isolated sector, it's a system. So it's linked, it has this fish chain connection, but it's also linked with other things that are happening in the community. And as a system itself, you have to be able to analyze them as part of the system that is being governed from the governance perspective, when we recognize a governing system that are doing something to make life of small-scale fisheries better, but mostly not as good as it should be, and then the interactions between the two. So we are informed by these theories of interactive governance to help us moving along, and I'm sort of having this particular lens in my own research in the last 10 years, so we actually are quite keen in looking at how small-scale fisheries need to be governed differently than large scales. But the transdisciplinary is really quite a challenge, because we here in the Fisheries Center and at UBC in general with this environmental program, we know that we have already doing this interdisciplinary. But what else do you want us to do, right? It is quite a healthy tension, I think, to think about we need to do a little bit more to go into areas where we don't know, to go and draw from other knowledge holders, like other stakeholders and other people who really know what they're talking about. But there will be places where neither one of us know, none of the groups that we're involved with know. So then we have to find a way to really understand what's going on. So the way we go about thinking about transdisciplinary at this time is to really say that it is about drawing from several disciplines in order to explore an empirical phenomenon. But it does not really aim to integrate or fuse disciplines. So people who want to join transdisciplinary discourse doesn't have to feel like you have to give up anything, right? It's just about adding to things as opposed to trying to say, oh, we're going to weaken everything, nobody's going to know anymore what's going on. No, bring your disciplinary lens and help us elevate it to the next level. It is going to be oriented around the wicked problem idea that defining a problem is a problem. And every problem could be unique. Not every problems are unique. Well, maybe not. I have to think about that again. But basically, sometimes we think we have solutions, but we might actually end up creating more problems elsewhere. And all we are doing is actually more solutions elsewhere, which is fine in some time, but sometimes we have to be more active about some of the things that we're doing. And then we need to really think about relying on sharing of the existing knowledge and also co-production of new ones. So that is very early in the thinking. So if anyone likes to talk about that, definitely talk to me after, because we need all the help we can to help us moving forward. The transdisciplinary fisheries course would be something we put up online, accessible free to anyone who anyone interested. You can download the teaching modules and use that to train on site as well as offline. Okay? There's a lot of governance innovation that has been taking place already in the world of fisheries. It's very, very exciting. There's transition, transformation, and we want to make sure that we make a proposition about the change that is required. Here is what we're learning already from about 30 different case studies looking at fisheries governance, how small-scale fisheries are governed. Governance takes place along a continuum, and it's often a mixture of modes. What we think of the hierarchical top-down state control is actually still dominates, but it's now shifting towards something that is more, we call it top light, in the sense that it's actually started to engage more with people, the stakeholders, maybe not yet at the co-governance or co-management level, but it's moving into that direction. We started to know that this co-management, where everywhere we look, co-governance, co-management comes up a lot about small-scale fisheries. Maybe that is what is required. This shift of that mode is going to be happening a lot more, we think. But there are also those governance systems that it's about the self-governance, and we know that they also exist. So how to navigate and understand what's happening and what kind of governance system works best for small-scale fisheries, it's really about understanding the context and learn and appreciate that they can shift and move, and there's those continuum that is operating in the midst of mode as well. We're very, very happy to see that there are now small-scale fisheries guidelines. FAO has fought long and hard to make this happen. The guidelines are about trying to provide opportunities for thinking about small-scale fisheries in a different way. It is different principles that we need when we wanted to talk about viability, sustainability, and future food security of small-scale fisheries. It is about doing more of the different types of research that we're doing in the Too Big to Ignore project and trying to advance our knowledge. It's about really changing the way governments and other organizations view this world of small-scale fisheries. We have a good opportunity to really contribute to this in a very important way. A lot of research that we are doing in Too Big to Ignore would be part of what would be used to help implement these guidelines. It's just been adopted. It was a lot of work to get it adopted. Canada is one of the countries that made our life very, very difficult when we needed to adopt this. Imagine being the only country in the world that didn't want these guidelines. For what reason? We already do a good job. Or maybe they're not that important. It's not acceptable. So we took major issue with Canadian government, and we still do, because implementation needs to take place. And what I heard is that, well, we will endorse the guidelines, but we don't think we need to implement it in Canada. We shall see about that. Okay, lots of examples around the world in terms of innovation. Then I like to start from my own country always, because we do a lot of bad stuff, but we also do a lot of good stuff. We're trying to save the turtles, we're trying to save the mangroves, we're trying to do more in terms of contribute to the productivity of the marine system through the crab bank project, bring the female crab and let them breed and then release that little ones out later. We do a lot in terms of market innovation. I get in trouble when I show this picture. What is innovation? Is that about child labor? I'm just like, listen here. Children do involve, and they can get involved in many ways. We have in Norway, people are putting high school children to work in fisheries so that they can earn money and learn about the fishing culture. There's big people supervising this, right? So kids enjoy this a lot, and they make a little bit of money, and they're part of the system. need to do more of that, and don't think that we need to protect them so much. In Africa, I also like, because there's a lot of policy reform that happened there, and governance. They have now small-scale fisheries policy. First time. Almost one of the first countries that have fisheries policy, specific small-scale fisheries. So there's a lot of things we can do in the world of small-scale fisheries. Once we embrace that lens about the need to look broadly, the need to be holistic, the need to understand better what's happening. And we can all do more in paying attention to this sector and not dismissing them as not that important or thinking about them as, well, we can replace them with other things that perhaps can contribute to what all those major concerns that we have. Our point about to ignore is to recognize their importance and their contribution and their role in the society and their place in the world. So with that, I'll leave you with our thank you note and a little bit of the website where you can visit us, and also email address. Not really mine, but you write to that email address, I get the message. Thank you very much.
So we have 10 minutes for questions, and we're going to start with a student question first, and then move on to anybody else who wants to ask something. So, students?
Does it mean nobody cares about small-scale fisheries?
Vanessa?
I was wondering if you could speak more specifically about some of the misconceptions about like the implementation and management of small-scale fisheries that you found most challenging in your work, like when you're working with people who are more versed in like industrial fishing. Where are the biggest concerns?
And this is something that we struggle with a lot, right? Because for the most part, when we started to develop instruments, policy tools, we don't really know well how to do it, and we started something that is easy to handle. So we go with something we have data. So we would try to manage sector as if there's data. So we think about commercial sector, we think that there's, we can control the landings, or we can look at the, using tools and ways to think about fisheries that capture everything about fisheries. So we are stuck with those instruments that are only applicable to part of the sector, but not all. I mean, there's a lot more things happening in the world of small-scale fisheries. None of that information, Dirk would be the person to tell you more about how that is not captured in the way we need to do our information system, right? When it comes to data collection and etc. So we're missing a major part, and we still don't know how to do it. So policy tools and instruments that we use to manage the fisheries today are basically not applicable to the characteristics of the small-scale fisheries sector. It's appalling, actually, to think that whatever we think we can do with certain fishery system, the sector, we can apply that everywhere around the world. It just doesn't work. I think the fact that they have a lot less voice and not as influential in policy decision forum is also making things a lot more difficult for them. Because people like to talk about this sector being poor, right? And when you're poor, you don't, when you're poor, you don't speak up, right? When you're poor, you don't eat, right? So we don't worry about them so much. And that's the kind of things that make it really, really, really difficult for us to move forward with that. So there's a lot of contribution that small-scale fisheries make in each society. When we try to find out how important small-scale fisheries are, you go and talk to communities that small-scale fisheries take place, and they will be telling you something as follows. They will say something like, the small-scale fishing people are the sector that would contribute to generate all the revenues and all the prosperity in a place. That comes from small-scale fishing people, because they would buy fuel, they would buy grocery, they would eat there, live there, and spend money there. And that's not the case with other sectors. So we like to bring this thing about contribution to the global GDP and etc. But when you look at the level that matters, things are very
Yoshi and then Bokta.
I just wanna, it's a hard question, but do you think small-scale fisheries are more sustainable than industrial commercial fisheries?
Do you think large-scale fisheries are sustainable?
No, do you think small-scale is
Right,
more
okay.
sustainable than large-scale?
Yeah.
Are you asking me, right?
Right. Well, no, that's the thing, right? So we have seen examples of very sustainable small-scale fisheries, and I'm sure you can say the same about large-scale as well. Some of them, right? To us, it's about, if you have to think about the world of fisheries and trying to imagine yourself in terms of what would be the best way to harvest the fisheries, right? To us, it would still be, let's do it in a small scale, less impact, and not, like I said, not to suggest that they don't create any impact at all, but if we were to remove, this is how I see the world of fisheries, if we were to remove all the large-scale fisheries, there would still be a lot of fish that would contribute to whatever large-scale fishing sector thinks they're doing to the society. And then there would be a lot of fisheries for a lot of smaller scale fisheries, and then we need to avoid that tendency to try to develop small scale fisheries into something that is more advanced, etc. Right? So there are opportunities, there are places where small scale fisheries can be very sustainable, and we've seen that. I mean, they have lasted much longer than any other sector at the end of the day. There's still a lot of people that continue to fish, right, in that quite traditional, not to say that it's, it's not modern enough, but it's, there's some modernization that happens, but things are still good. And what I believe is that it depends on the mindset and the principles behind, or the reasons why you fish. And we believe that why small-scale fisheries can be more sustainable, because the reason for fishing is very different from the reason why we need to fish for in a large-scale sector. It's not about return on investment. It's about a livelihood. It's about being really enjoying and contributing to your part of the society. So that's how that's what we think.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the talk. When you talk about marginalization, or being marginalized, to me it means that you don't have the influence on the decision that's being made. And that can come to governance, like you mentioned, but it can also come to market. You have, in most cases, these small fisheries are price takers. They have no decision on where to sell, how much to sell. They just run whatever they have and pay for whatever the price get. So in this project, I know you're looking at the structure of the governance and how to bring people into that type of decision making. But do you also are you looking into how the different markets are structured and how the way they're organized, how some groups have more influence on the interaction than the other? Is that something that you're considering?
Yes. I mean, the governance underlines, basically the governance of the fishing is what we look at.
Yeah.
Right, so it's about understanding the power within those actors that are involved in the marketing of the fish, right?
In the governance, through the regulation, or through the market dynamics, the relationship within the market?
Yeah, okay. It is exactly what you said. So in order to understand, say, from viability perspective, and from the well-being, livelihoods perspective, we need to know, right, what happens to the fish, right, once it lands. So we need to understand, right, how marketing system works in a small-scale fishing setting. And actually, there's a lot of small-scale fishing people around the world that actually take control of the market much more so than we think. There's ways to formalize, there are ways to organize the marketing system that benefits small-scale fisheries so much more than we think. We may think that they're being taken advantage of and cannot do anything in terms of pricing, etc. That happens too, but we have a lot of examples around the world that small-scale fishing cooperatives, market cooperatives is actually very strong. So indeed, that is something we look at, right? But when I say the governance of the market system, it's a lot to do with power and relationship.
Yeah.
And that is not so much about what happens to the fish, but who decides, right? Who makes decision about those. And like I said, the work is about trying to understand alternative markets for fishing people, if that is what is required, or gaining more market share, if, in the existing context, through other ways of organizing people and providing more access and etc. Those are, the usual stuff. But really thinking more carefully about what needs to happen to the fish in terms of consumption at a household level, in terms of marketing at the location, and then connecting to the export market. Because there's a lot of small-scale fisheries as well that are connecting to the export market. And how to make sure that distribution of that benefits actually, get distributed within the small-scale sector.
One more question.
Yeah, sure. Well, while we're on the question of markets, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether connecting to big global markets is, in fact, a good solution for small-scale fisheries. There's a lot of arguments right now for rights-based approaches, and the right-based approaches, the argument generally is that the rights are granted and that then those fisheries should also be connected to big global markets. The same is happening in terms of the MSC certification processes. It's happening everywhere from the developing world to the developed world, that we should certify these fisheries, and then once they're certified, then we should connect them to global markets. Is that the right solution?
That's a trick question, right? We have a long discussion and debate about this, always ongoing rather, right? Because it is important to recognize that. I mean, the only way to really know that that's a solution or not is really to see who benefits, right? At the end of the day, we haven't had enough examples to really show us that small-scale fishing people would benefit from any of those. Even those that have MSC certification on their label. One thing I learned, they told me, right, Mexican lobster people who got the certification with MSC, they said it's not so much about gaining anything, but it's about being visible to their government. Because in some way or another, once they have that label, they can then negotiate with their government to get whatever they need for their center. And I said, well, that's a very interesting way to use that instrument for their cause. But if you ask, today, do we need that for small-scale fisheries to be viable and sustainable? I don't believe so. Because there are many, many other ways to connect. There are many other ways to really, gain, to make it meaningful for small-scale fishing people. It's not about having to link into these big global markets. It's not about, and the concern that we have, of course, is how to make sure that they can do it without feeling the pressure of having to. And I think that's why the study about these alternative markets, I mean, in Europe, in many other places around the world, there's no room for MSC talk anywhere, because there's no need for that. There's a super good market structure already happening for small-scale fisheries. So I think they need to. I think that kind of rhetoric about we would create wealth for everybody, everyone would be happy. We just need to question that a lot, especially if we're concerned with what's happening.
Thank you so much, Ratana. And we're going to have a bit of a discussion meeting with the FISH500 students in 107. So if anybody's really interested in talking a bit more to Ratana, can